smooth, stable. For centuries, our understanding of human history has been clear. First came farming, then permanent settlements, then finally the complex structures of society and religion. But hidden in the dust of ancient Anatolia, a secret waited, buried for 12,000 years, ready to shatter that entire narrative. It's a place that suggests our deepest spiritual urges didn't follow civilization, they actually built it. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, we're unearthing one of the most profound archaeological mysteries of all time, Göbekli Tepe, the temple that existed before what we thought was the dawn of civilization. And I guarantee you, by the end of this journey, your understanding of human history and even what it means to be human will never be the same. If you're as captivated by secrets buried beneath the sands of time as I am, and you don't want to miss a single one of the ancient enigmas we unravel every week, then do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Now, let's step back, way back, to a time when mammoths still roam the earth and delve into the unbelievable story of Göbekli Tepe. The story of Göbekli Tepe, often called Potbelly Hill in Turkish, begins not with a grand expedition, but with a quiet, almost dismissive initial observation. For generations, locals knew this rounded mound, rising about 50 feet above the barren Gürmeş mountain range in southeastern Turkey, as a sacred place, a wish hill. The land around it was cultivated, but the hill itself remained largely undisturbed, its slopes littered with flint and scattered stones. These seemingly unremarkable features, however, hinted at a deeper past. In 1963, a joint archaeological survey conducted by the universities of Istanbul and Chicago first noted the site. American archaeologist Peter Benedict, part of that team, identified some of the tools found there as characteristic of the aceramic Neolithic period, a time before pottery. But he largely misinterpreted the significance of the fragmented limestone slabs he saw, believing them to be little more than medieval grave markers. The site was then largely forgotten, overshadowed by other important Neolithic discoveries in the region, such as Navali Chori, which revealed early monumental stone sculptures and T-shaped pillars in its own right. Fast forward 3 decades to 1994. Enter Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist with a keen eye and insatiable curiosity for the early Neolithic period in southeast Turkey. Having worked extensively at Navali Chori, Schmidt was intimately familiar with the unique T-shaped pillars that had been unearthed there, recognizing them as highly abstracted depictions of the human body. He was actively searching for other similar prehistoric sites in the region. It was a brief mention in the University of Chicago's earlier report that drew Schmidt to Göbekli Tepe. He decided to revisit the hilltop himself, seeking out places locals referred to as having çakmak taşı, or flint. A local farmer, Eşyay Yıldız, who owned the land, directed him to the mound, where families had previously found artifacts while plowing their fields and building boundary walls, even reporting them to the nearby Şanlıurfa Museum. As Schmidt stood on that hill in October of 1994, under the Anatolian sun, he saw what others had overlooked. The broken pieces of limestone, dismissed as gravestones by earlier surveyors, immediately struck him differently. He recognized in them the unmistakable curves of monumental T-shaped pillars similar to those he had seen at Navali Chori, just barely peeking out from the earth. He reportedly said, "Only man could have created something like this." It was clear right away this was a gigantic Stone Age site. This wasn't just another prehistoric mound. It was something extraordinary. The very shape of the hill, gently rounded and rising above the landscape, suggested a deliberate, human-made structure, a tell, an artificial mound created by centuries of accumulated archaeological deposits. Schmidt's instinct told him this was a monumental discovery, a place that could rewrite the earliest chapters of human history. In 1995, Schmidt initiated official excavations at Göbekli Tepe, a collaborative effort with the Şanlıurfa Museum and the German Archaeological Institute. The initial work was a test trench at the base of the southeastern slope, where a modern pit had cut through an ancient terrazzo floor. almost immediately, a peculiarity of the site became apparent. The mound wasn't primarily composed of earth and loam, but rather largely from limestone cobbles, bones, and flints mixed with very little earth. This suggested intensive human activity and construction. One early challenge illustrated the site's profound significance. During the first field season, a landowner began clearing his field in the southeastern depression, digging out the heads of two large T-shaped pillars. He had even started to smash one with a sledgehammer, thinking they were merely obstacles to plowing. Fortunately, he was persuaded to stop, and work then shifted to this area in 1996. What emerged from the earth was the first of Göbekli Tepe's monumental enclosures from its older layer, known as Layer 3. What Schmidt and his team unearthed over the next 2 decades was nothing short of staggering. They uncovered massive circular enclosures, a series of them, each featuring colossal T-shaped limestone pillars. These pillars, some reaching up to 18 feet tall and weighing between 7 and 10 tons, some estimates suggest the tallest pillars could weigh as much as 50 tons.
Smooth, stable. These were not just rough stones. Many were intricately carved with detailed bas-reliefs of wild animals, foxes, lions, boars, gazelles, snakes, vultures, scorpions, and other reptiles and insects. Some pillars even depicted abstract symbols, while others showed stylized anthropomorphic details like arms, hands, belts, and loincloths, suggesting they represented human-like figures, perhaps deities or revered ancestors. The sheer scale and sophistication of these structures were mind-boggling, especially given their age. Radiocarbon dating confirmed that the earliest exposed structures at Göbekli Tepe were built between 9500 and 9000 BCE at the end of the pre-pottery Neolithic A period. The site was significantly expanded in the early 9th millennium BCE and remained in use until around 8000 BCE. This meant that Göbekli Tepe predates Stonehenge by some 6,000 years and the Egyptian pyramids by approximately 7,500 years. It was constructed by people who had not yet developed metal tools or even pottery. Their only tools would have been stone hammers and flint blades, remnants of which have been found extensively at the site. One of the most profound early observations was the apparent lack of any evidence for long-term domestic settlement at the site. There were no homes, no kitchens, leading Klaus Schmidt to initially believe it was strictly a place of worship, a sanctuary used by nomadic hunter-gatherers, perhaps a central location for a cult of the dead, or a pilgrimage site for feasts and religious celebrations timed with seasonal game availability. This interpretation suggested that complex religious practices and monumental architecture predated settled agricultural life, completely overturning the long-held archaeological paradigm. Excavations have continued at Göbekli Tepe since Schmidt's passing in 2014 as a joint project of Istanbul University, Schönlerfe Museum, and the German Archaeological Institute. As of 2021, only about 10% of the site has been excavated, meaning that untold secrets still lie buried beneath the Turkish soil. And even as research progresses, the initial shock waves of Göbekli Tepe's unearthing continue to ripple through the world of archaeology, forcing us to fundamentally reconsider the very foundations of human civilization. It has become a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its outstanding universal value as one of the first manifestations of human-made monumental architecture. And as we delve deeper into Göbekli Tepe, it is this very architecture that presents some of the most profound and beguiling puzzles. When you stand at the site gazing upon those ancient stones, you are not merely looking at ruins. You are confronting a testament to a level of engineering and artistic sophistication that for so long we believe was utterly beyond the capabilities of people living 10,000 years ago. The sheer scale and ambition of these structures, built by hands that had yet to even fashion a simple pot, force us to recalibrate our understanding of the human story. The most striking architectural features at Göbekli Tepe are its series of monumental circular enclosures, often referred to by the letters A, B, C, D, and so on. To date, at least 20 such enclosures have been identified through geomagnetic surveys, though only a handful have been fully excavated. Each of these structures is defined by massive T-shaped stone pillars arranged in a circular formation, with even two larger T-pillars standing sentinel in the very center. Imagine a series of concentric rings like ripples in an ancient pond, each one a profound statement in stone. These enclosures vary in size, from 10 to 30 meters in diameter, but they share a common blueprint. The perimeter walls, meticulously constructed from rough stone and bound with a simply dry stone technique, encircle a space defined by these imposing T-pillars. Some enclosures, like the famous enclosure D, feature carefully polished terrazzo floors, made from burnt lime, creating smooth, hard surfaces that would have gleamed under the ancient sun or moonlight. Within these floors, archaeologists have found strange circular holes or depressions, their purpose still debated. Perhaps they once held other perishable wooden poles, or collected offerings, or even served as fire pits for ritualistic flames. Now, let us turn our attention to the heart of these structures, the T-shaped pillars themselves. These are not merely stones, they are silent sentinels, carved from the local limestone. Standing up to 5.5 meters tall and weighing as much as 20 tons, they dominate the enclosures. Their form is utterly unique, resembling highly stylized human figures, arms bent at the elbow, hands resting on their bellies, often marked by a carved belt or even a loincloth. It is this anthropomorphic quality that suggests these pillars might represent powerful ancestors, deities, or perhaps even a symbolic representation of the community itself. When you look closely at their smooth, often polished surfaces, you can almost feel the presence of the artists who brought them to life so many millennia ago. But it is the elaborate relief carvings adorning these pillars that truly captivate. The surface of almost every T-pillar is a canvas of the ancient world, teeming with a vibrant menagerie of animals, abstract symbols, and enigmatic narrative scenes. Here you will find fierce boars, agile foxes, slithering snakes, predatory scorpions, and a host of birds, particularly cranes and vultures, all rendered with astonishing realism and artistic flair. These are not crude stick figures. They are dynamic, detailed representations, often depicted in motion or interacting with unseen forces.
Smooth, stable. Consider the sheer effort involved in these carvings. Without metal tools, the sculptors of Göbekli Tepe would have used flint blades, stone chisels, and abrasive sands to chip away at the tough limestone, slowly, patiently revealing the forms within. The precision and artistry are remarkable, suggesting a highly developed aesthetic sense and an intimate knowledge of the natural world around them. Each animal, each symbol was deliberately chosen, deliberately placed, leading us to believe they held deep symbolic significance for the people who created them. Were they totems representing different clans? Were they spirit guides, guardians of the sacred space? Or perhaps were they constellations, mapping the night sky onto the terrestrial temple floor? The truth remains elusive, adding to the site's profound mystique. One of the most famous examples of this intricate iconography is found on Pillar 43 in Enclosure D, often referred to as the Vulture Stone. This single pillar is a masterpiece of prehistoric art and a nexus of scholarly debate. It depicts a headless human figure, surrounded by a vulture, a scorpion, and a host of other animals and abstract symbols. Some scholars have interpreted this scene as a depiction of a funeral ritual, perhaps even excarnation, where bodies were exposed to scavengers before burial, a practice known in later Neolithic cultures. Others have proposed a far grander cosmological interpretation, suggesting it represents a catastrophic event, perhaps a comet impact or an astronomical chart marking solstices, equinoxes, or even specific constellations. The debate around the vulture stone highlights the depth of the mysteries still embedded within these ancient carvings. Beyond the iconic T-pillars, the very construction techniques employed at Göbekli Tepe pose monumental questions. How did a society without the wheel, without draft animals, without metal tools, manage to quarry, transport, and erect stones weighing up to 20 tons? The quarries for the limestone pillars have been identified nearby, showing where massive blocks were detached from the bedrock. But the journey from quarry to site, often uphill, would have been an unimaginable feat of human strength and ingenuity. It would have required thousands of people, coordinating their efforts, perhaps using ropes made of animal hide or plant fibers, wooden rollers, and immense leverage. This suggests a level of social organization, collective labor, and shared purpose that archaeologists previously believed was only possible after the advent of settled agriculture and more hierarchical societies. Göbekli Tepe stands as a powerful counterargument to that long-held assumption. The precision with which these massive stones were fitted together, even in tri-stone masonry, is equally impressive. The walls are robust, the pillars upright and perfectly aligned. The creation of those smooth terrazzo floors, involving heating lime to high temperatures and then cooling and polishing it, further demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of materials and a dedication to craftsmanship far beyond what we typically associate with a hunter-gatherer existence. This was not haphazard construction. It was a carefully planned and meticulously executed monumental project undertaken with immense reverence and skill. Perhaps the most perplexing architectural puzzle, however, lies in the successive layers of construction and ultimately the deliberate burial of the entire site. Göbekli Tepe is not a single continuous temple complex that grew organically over time. Instead, it seems to have been built in distinct phases, with newer enclosures like the smaller, less elaborate enclosures A and B being constructed after the massive older ones like enclosure D were intentionally filled in and covered in. Imagine the effort. After centuries of use, perhaps millennia, the people of Göbekli Tepe decided to bury their magnificent temples. They didn't just abandon them, they meticulously filled the enclosures with rubble, earth, and debris, completely concealing the monumental T-pillars and intricately carved walls. This was not a natural accumulation of sediment, it was a deliberate, systematic act of interment. Thousands, if not millions, of cubic meters of material were moved by hand, scoop by scoop, to entomb these sacred structures. Why? The question haunts every archaeologist who works at the site. Was it a form of ritual closure, a sacred act of preservation, sealing away the power of the old gods or ancestors? Was it to protect the site from desecration, or perhaps to hide it from a changing world? Or did a profound shift in their beliefs, their society, or their environment necessitate the covering of these sacred spaces? The later enclosures, built on top of or adjacent to the older buried ones, are generally smaller and less complex, suggesting a possible decline in the scale of communal effort or a change in the nature of their rituals. This gradual diminution, culminating in the complete burial, hints at a profound story of transformation that we're only just beginning to decipher. The very act of burying these temples speaks volumes about their significance. They were not mere buildings, they were living entities imbued with spiritual power, and their interment was an act of profound reverence. It suggests that the people of Göbekli Tepe saw their sacred spaces as something to be honored even in their passing, perhaps to ensure that their spiritual potency remained bound to the earth from which they arose.
Smooth, stable. The architectural puzzles of Göbekli Tepe challenge our deepest assumptions about early human capabilities. They force us to ask, how did nomadic hunter-gatherers, supposedly living hand-to-mouth, develop the social cohesion, the organizational skills, the technological know-how, and the shared ideological vision to embark on such monumental undertakings? The structures themselves, with their intricate carvings and imposing scale, speak not of mere survival, but of a rich inner world, a complex cosmology, and a profound connection to the sacred. They are a physical manifestation of a belief system that predates written history, offering tantalizing glimpses into the very genesis of human faith and collective identity. And it is this very challenge to our traditional narrative that makes Göbekli Tepe such an extraordinary and enduring wonder. This challenge to our traditional narrative is perhaps the most profound revelation Göbekli Tepe offers, a complete reevaluation of the people who built it. For centuries, our understanding of human history has been framed by a simple, linear progression. First, we were nomadic hunter-gatherers, moving constantly in small bands, subsisting on what nature offered day to day. Then, roughly 12,000 years ago, came the agricultural revolution, an explosion of innovation that saw us settle down, cultivate crops, domesticate animals, and establish permanent villages. From this stability, so the story goes, flowed everything else: surplus food, population growth, social hierarchy, specialized labor, and eventually the rise of cities, writing, and complex civilization. In this narrative, agriculture was the undeniable catalyst, the indispensable foundation upon which all complexity was built. Göbekli Tepe shatters this neat progression. It is a monument of breathtaking scale and sophistication, a vast temple complex that predates not just agriculture, but even pottery. Its builders were not farmers living in settled villages, but hunter-gatherers. This alone demands a radical rethinking of everything we thought we knew about the dawn of human civilization. How could people whom we traditionally envision as living on the brink of survival, constantly chasing their next meal, possibly conceive, organize, and execute a project of this magnitude? Imagine for a moment the sheer effort involved, the quarrying with those massive T-pillars, some weighing upward of 16 tons from distant bedrock. The painstaking process of shaping them with rudimentary stone tools, the immense communal effort required to transport them, dragging them across uneven terrain, perhaps for miles. Then the precision needed to lift them into their upright positions within the circular enclosures. This wasn't a one-time endeavor. It was repeated again and again across multiple enclosures over a period of perhaps 1,000 years. This speaks not of fleeting efforts by a few individuals, but of sustained, multi-generational communal labor, a deep understanding of engineering principles, and an intricate social structure capable of coordinating hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Our traditional image of the hunter-gatherer is often one of a highly mobile group, constantly on the move with few material possessions and a largely egalitarian social structure. They are seen as living in harmony with nature, certainly, but also at its mercy, with little capacity for large-scale organization or surplus production. Göbekli Tepe challenges every facet of this stereotype. It implies a degree of social complexity, specialization, and perhaps even hierarchy that was thought to emerge only after the adoption of agriculture. Who were the leaders who envisioned these structures? Who organized the labor? Who allocated resources? Who passed down the knowledge from one generation to the next? These are questions that force us to look at hunter-gatherers through a completely new lens. The key to understanding this apparent paradox lies in revisiting our definition of a hunter-gatherer. It's not a single monolithic lifestyle. The term encompasses a vast spectrum of human societies, from highly nomadic groups in harsh environments to more sedentary ones in resource-rich areas. And it is the latter, the affluent foragers, who offer a glimpse into the world that made Göbekli Tepe possible. The region where Göbekli Tepe stands, the northern Fertile Crescent, was in the early Neolithic period a land of extraordinary natural abundance. This was not a barren desert. It was a verdant landscape teeming with wild resources. Crucially, this region was the natural habitat of wild ancestors of many domesticated plants and animals. We are talking about vast stands of wild einkorn wheat, wild barley, and a diverse array of wild legumes like lentils, peas, and chickpeas. These were not just scattered patches, they were often dense, easily harvested fields. Imagine the bounty! Enough wild grains to sustain large gatherings, requiring far less effort than full-scale cultivation.
Smooth, stable, but the abundance didn't stop there. The rolling hills and fertile plains were also home to immense herds of wild animals. Gazelle, wild sheep, goats, and most notably the mighty oryx, the ancestor of modern cattle. Hunting these animals would have provided a rich source of protein and fat. The nearby rivers and lakes also offered fish, fowl, and other aquatic resources. This was a land of plenty, where the effort required to gather or hunt sufficient food to sustain a relatively large population for significant periods was surprisingly low. This rich natural larder meant that the people of Göbekli Tepe did not need to be constantly on the move. They could establish relatively stable base camps, perhaps seasonal, and exploit the concentrated resources around them. This sedentism before agriculture is a critical concept that Göbekli Tepe powerfully illustrates. It suggests that humans began to settle down not necessarily because they started farming, but because certain environments offered such reliable and abundant wild food sources that a nomadic lifestyle became less essential, even less efficient. Why chase scattered game when large herds migrate through your valley and wild grains ripen in accessible fields year after year? With a secure food supply, even a wild one, surplus became possible. This surplus, however small or seasonal, was the crucial ingredient that allowed for projects beyond immediate survival. It meant that a portion of the community's time and energy could be diverted from daily foraging to other activities, carving stone, constructing monumental architecture, or engaging in elaborate rituals. It's important to remember that this wasn't necessarily a constant surplus that supported a permanent population at Göbekli Tepe year-round. Instead, it was likely a seasonal surplus that facilitated large periodic gatherings, bringing together dispersed hunter-gatherer groups for communal feasting, ritual, and construction. The feasting evidence found at Göbekli Tepe supports this idea. Vast quantities of animal bones, particularly from gazelle and oryx, show clear signs of communal feasting. These weren't just everyday meals. These were colossal barbecues, ritualistic consumption events designed to bring people together, solidify social bonds, and perhaps celebrate the success of their construction efforts. The sheer scale of these feasts implies significant coordination and a shared sense of purpose among disparate groups. So if agriculture wasn't the driver, what was? The evidence from Göbekli Tepe strongly suggests that it was something far more profound and perhaps uniquely human: shared belief and ritual. The monumental structures, with their intricate animal carvings and symbolic imagery, scream sacred space. They're temples, not dwellings. This implies that the genesis of complex society, at least in this part of the world, might have been driven not by economic necessity or the need for more efficient food production, but by the powerful unifying force of shared cosmology and ritual. Imagine a world where groups of hunter-gatherers, perhaps spread across a wide territory, converged at this sacred hill for specific times of the year, perhaps during seasonal migrations of game or when wild grains were ready for harvest. These gatherings would have been potent opportunities for social interaction, exchange of goods and ideas, finding mates, and crucially participating in communal rituals. The building of the temples themselves would have been a profoundly ritualistic act, a collective endeavor that transcended individual or familial needs, binding diverse groups together through a shared monumental project dedicated to the sacred. This flips our conventional understanding of civilization on its head. Instead of agriculture leading to settled life, which then leads to complex societies and the development of religion, Göbekli Tepe suggests that profound spiritual beliefs and ritual practices might have been the initial spark. The temple came before the village. The need for a shared sacred space, a focal point for communal gatherings, might have been what first compelled groups to cooperate on an unprecedented scale, to pool their resources and labor, and to begin the long journey toward more sedentary and complex forms of social organization. Göbekli Tepe exists within the broader archaeological context of the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, roughly 9,600 to 8,800 BCE. This was a time of immense environmental and social change following the end of the last ice age. The climate was warming, and new ecological niches were opening up. While Göbekli Tepe is unique in its scale and monumental artistry, other contemporary sites in the region like Navali Jorri show similar T-shaped pillars and shared iconography, suggesting a broader cultural sphere united by similar beliefs and practices. Göbekli Tepe stands as the most elaborate and earliest known expression of this profound spiritual and social revolution. What does this reevaluation mean for our understanding of human development? It suggests that the human capacity for abstract thought, symbolic expression, and collective identity based on shared beliefs is far more ancient and powerful than we previously imagined. It implies that complex social structures can emerge from non-agricultural foundations, driven by powerful cultural and spiritual imperatives. It highlights the idea that our ancestors were not just struggling for survival, they were deeply engaged with the cosmos, seeking meaning and expressing their understanding of the world through monumental art and architecture.
Are these pillars stylized ancestors, powerful shamans, or perhaps even nascent deities? The prevailing theory leans towards them representing powerful beings, perhaps supernatural entities or spirit guides, watching over the sacred space. Their central placement, often arranged in pairs at the heart of each enclosure, reinforces their importance. They stand as the very embodiment of the sacred, anchoring the spiritual energy of the site. The act of entering an enclosure, surrounded by these towering, watchful figures adorned with powerful animal spirits, must have been an utterly transformative experience for the people of the time. Consider the atmosphere within these enclosures. These were not open-air plazas. They were often semi-enclosed spaces, some with roofs, others open to the sky. Imagine the flickering firelight casting dancing shadows on the carved reliefs, making the animals seem to move, to breathe. Think of the sounds that would have filled these spaces. The rhythmic chanting, the percussive beat of drums, perhaps the wailing of flutes made from bone or reeds. The very acoustics of the enclosures would have amplified sounds, creating an immersive, almost trance-inducing environment. This was a place designed for intense, communal ritual, for a deep engagement with the unseen world. Archaeological evidence, particularly from the vast quantities of animal bones found at the site, suggests that large-scale feasting was an integral part of the Göbekli Tepe experience. Tens of thousands of bone fragments, predominantly from wild gazelle, aurochs, and various birds, indicate that people came together, perhaps from far-flung regions, to share in elaborate meals. These were not simply sustenance. They were likely ritual feasts, integral to communal gatherings, perhaps celebrating successful hunts, marking astronomical events, or solidifying social bonds under the watchful gaze of the pillar beings. The shared consumption of food, particularly in a ritual context, is a powerful act of communion, strengthening both spiritual connection and social cohesion.
What motivated such profound, sustained communal effort? It speaks to a human need that transcends mere physical survival. A primal desire to understand the world, to connect with forces beyond themselves, to find meaning in the vast, often terrifying expanse of existence. Before the rise of settled societies, hunter-gatherers lived in intimate connection with the natural world, acutely aware of its rhythms, its bounties, and its perils. This close relationship often fostered a worldview where the spiritual was not separate from the physical, where every animal, every rock, every river held a living spirit. Göbekli Tepe can be seen as the ultimate expression of this worldview, a monumental effort to bridge the gap between the earthly and the divine. It was a place where the human spirit soared, where the boundaries between the mundane and the sacred dissolved. The act of creating these structures was itself a ritual, a continuous, generations-long prayer etched in stone. And the act of attending, of participating in the ceremonies, would have reinforced a shared identity, a common narrative, and a collective purpose that bound these disparate groups together. In a world without writing, without established states, these sacred sites likely served as powerful unifying forces, centers of cultural exchange and innovation. Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of Göbekli Tepe, and a testament to the profound nature of its faith, is the deliberate and systematic burial of its enclosures. After centuries, perhaps even a millennium of use, each monumental structure was not simply abandoned or left to decay. Instead, they were meticulously backfilled with earth, rubble, and even broken pieces of previously carved pillars. This was not a chaotic dumping. It was a carefully executed act of concealment, an intentional sacred burial that preserved the structures almost as if laying them to rest. This act of burying speaks volumes about the reverence held for these spaces. It suggests a completion, a ritual closure, rather than an abrupt abandonment due to crisis or destruction. It's as if once their spiritual purpose had been fulfilled for a time, or perhaps when new, even grander visions emerged, the older structures were respectfully interred, making way for the new. The layering of these enclosures, one built atop the buried remains of another, suggests a cyclical understanding of time and purpose, a continuous process of creation, veneration, and ritualistic internment. This was not just building. It was a deeply meaningful engagement with the earth itself, an act of give and take, of making sacred and then returning to the earth what was sacred. This recurring pattern of construction and deliberate burial marks a profound continuity in their spiritual practices, spanning generations. It implies that the genesis of faith at Göbekli Tepe was not a fleeting phenomenon, but a deeply ingrained cultural practice that evolved and transformed over time, yet always retained its core reference for these unique sacred spaces. The act of burying the past structures could have also served as a powerful ritual symbolizing a transition, a renewal of vows, or a way to ensure the enduring power of the site by preserving its ancient heart beneath the new.
In essence, Göbekli Tepe represents humanity's earliest known monumental expression of a deep-seated spiritual imperative. It's a place where faith wasn't merely a private belief, but a driving force that shaped collective action, spurred innovation, and potentially even laid the groundwork for the radical societal shifts that would follow. It challenges us to rethink the very origins of our complex social structures, suggesting that the desire to worship, to connect with the sacred, might have been as fundamental to our development as the quest for food or shelter. It was here,
on this ancient Anatolian hilltop, that the seeds of collective devotion were sown long before the first city walls rose, long before the first priest stepped into a formal temple. Göbekli Tepe stands as a silent, powerful testament to the enduring human quest for meaning beyond the material, a quest that began in the Stone Age and continues to shape our world today. We've explored the extraordinary structures of Göbekli Tepe and the profound religious impulse that likely drove their creation. Now we turn our attention to one of the most intriguing aspects of this ancient site, its deliberate burial. It's a mystery that adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of these early peoples. Imagine, if you will, the sheer effort involved in constructing these massive stone enclosures and carving their intricate pillars. It was a monumental undertaking, requiring organization, skill, and a deep, shared purpose. But what is equally astounding, and perhaps even more perplexing, is that after centuries of use, these very structures were intentionally, systematically, and reverently interred. They weren't destroyed, abandoned to the ravages of time and weather, but carefully covered over, filled with debris, rubble, and earth, transforming a vibrant temple complex into a series of man-made mounds. The evidence for this deliberate burial is compelling. Archaeologists have noted that the fill material within the enclosures is not laid down in natural horizontal layers, as would occur with erosion or landslides. Instead, the stratigraphy suggests a rapid, purposeful filling, often with material brought from other areas. This wasn't merely the slow accumulation of dust and debris. It was a concerted effort by human hands. Before excavations began in the 1990s, Göbekli Tepe was simply a large mound, approximately 15 meters high, and covering about 9 hectares, a testament to these ancient earthworks. The question, of course, is why? Why would a people who invested so much in creating these sacred spaces then choose to bury them? This is where the story of Göbekli Tepe truly deepens, inviting us to speculate on the spiritual, cultural, and even practical reasons behind such a profound act. One prominent theory suggests that the burial was a form of desanctification or ritualistic closure. In many cultures throughout history, objects or buildings imbued with supernatural power, once their purpose was fulfilled or their relevance faded, were respectfully neutralized or returned to the earth. Perhaps, after centuries of intense ritual use, the energies or spiritual significance of these enclosures had run their course, or perhaps they had become too potent, too sacred, to be left exposed. Covering them over could have been seen as a way to contain their power, to protect anyone who might inadvertently stumble upon them without proper understanding or reverence. It's akin to how some ancient cultures would ritually kill or deface sacred objects before burial, deactivating their power before interment. This practice suggests a profound respect for the structures themselves and the forces they represented, rather than a desire to simply discard them. Another compelling idea, one initially championed by the site's primary excavator, Klaus Schmid, was that the burial was part of a cyclical process of renewal and veneration. The layering of enclosures, with new structures sometimes built on top of the buried remains of older ones, hints at a continuous spiritual engagement with the site over generations. Each burial might have symbolized a transition, a renewal of vows, or a way to preserve the ancient heart of the site beneath new constructions. This continuous process of creation, veneration, and ritualistic interment points to a deeply ingrained cultural practice that evolved over time, yet always retained its core reverence for these unique sacred spaces. It's also possible that the shift in beliefs or the emergence of a new religious paradigm played a role. As time passed, and perhaps as society itself began to transform, the specific rituals and significance associated with the earlier enclosures might have changed. Burying the old could have been a way to clear the slate, to make way for new expressions of faith, or even to symbolically destroy the old religion's totems if a new one took over. This doesn't necessarily imply conflict or violent overthrow, but rather a natural evolution of spiritual understanding within the community. Beyond the purely spiritual, there might have been practical considerations as well, although these are less likely to be the sole reason, given the monumental effort involved. Some theories propose that the burial helped to preserve the structures from erosion and the elements, ensuring their longevity for future generations. While hilltop locations are typically zones of erosion, not deposition, the sheer volume of fill material and its non-natural stratification strongly suggest human intervention. This deliberate act of preservation is itself a form of reverence, a desire to safeguard these sacred monuments.
Recent research has also introduced the possibility that natural phenomena, such as landslides or earthquakes, may have contributed to the filling of some enclosures. The site is built on a slope, and the constant pressure from domestic structures built on higher ground around the circular enclosures could have led to instability. There's evidence of repairs and rebuilding in some enclosures, suggesting that the ancient people were actively trying to counteract these pressures. However, even if natural events initiated some infilling, archaeologists widely agree that human intervention played a significant role in completing the burial, turning these natural processes into intentional acts. The fill within the enclosures, often containing rubble, animal bones, and flint tools, might be a mix of collapsing structural debris and deliberate rubbish disposal from higher ground. The presence of fragmented human bones within the fill layers is another poignant clue. While Göbekli Tepe was not a residential site in the traditional sense, lacking evidence of hearths, extensive trash pits, or domestic items, the scattered human remains suggests a connection to mortuary practices. Claude Schmidt, for instance, believed Göbekli Tepe might have been a central location for a cult of the dead, or a burial ground, where the deceased were laid out among the carved pillars, connecting with the stylized representations of gods and spirits. The intentional burial of the structures could therefore be intrinsically linked to the respectful interment of human remains, a final act of returning both the sacred spaces and their associated spirits to the earth. The careful placement of smaller rocks around the megaliths and the layering of gravel and mud further illustrate the meticulous nature of this burial process, distinguishing it from natural sedimentation. Considered the sheer scale of this endeavor, to fill these massive circular enclosures, some of which held pillars weighing 8 to 10 metric tons, required the movement of an enormous amount of earth and stone. It speaks to a deeply ingrained communal effort, one sustained over many centuries. This wasn't a single isolated event, but a repeated practice as new structures were built and older ones interred. The abandonment of the circular enclosures was a gradual process, likely evolving as the site did. What does this tell us about the people of Göbekli Tepe? It suggests a profound and enduring relationship with their sacred spaces, one that went beyond mere construction and use. It speaks to a cyclical understanding of time and purpose, where creation was intimately linked with return and renewal. Their actions demonstrate a deep reverence for the past, not as something to be discarded, but as something to be honored and preserved, even beneath layers of earth. It also highlights their adaptability. As their beliefs or circumstances evolved, so too did their interaction with this monumental site. The act of burial at Göbekli Tepe is a powerful reminder that the spiritual landscape of our earliest ancestors was incredibly rich and complex.
It wasn't simply about building temples to worship. It was about engaging with the earth, with the sacred, in a continuous, evolving dialogue. The burial was not an ending, but a transformation, a testament to a culture that understood the profound interplay between creation, veneration, and the enduring power of the sacred, even when hidden from view.
Recent research has also introduced the possibility that natural phenomena, such as landslides or earthquakes, may have contributed to the filling of some enclosures. The site is built on a slope, and the constant pressure from domestic structures built on higher ground around the circular enclosures could have led to instability. There's evidence of repairs and rebuilding in some enclosures, suggesting that the ancient people were actively trying to counteract these pressures. However, even if natural events initiated some infilling, archaeologists widely agree that human intervention played a significant role in completing the burial, turning these natural processes into intentional acts. The fill within the enclosures, often containing rubble, animal bones, and flint tools, might be a mix of collapsing structural debris and deliberate rubbish disposal from higher ground. The presence of fragmented human bones within the fill layers is another poignant clue. While Göbekli Tepe was not a residential site in the traditional sense, lacking evidence of hearths, extensive trash pits, or domestic items, the scattered human remains suggests a connection to mortuary practices. Claude Schmidt, for instance, believed Göbekli Tepe might have been a central location for a cult of the dead, or a burial ground, where the deceased were laid out among the carved pillars, connecting with the stylized representations of gods and spirits. The intentional burial of the structures could therefore be intrinsically linked to the respectful interment of human remains, a final act of returning both the sacred spaces and their associated spirits to the earth. The careful placement of smaller rocks around the megaliths and the layering of gravel and mud further illustrate the meticulous nature of this burial process, distinguishing it from natural sedimentation. Considered the sheer scale of this endeavor. To fill these massive circular enclosures, some of which held pillars weighing 8 to 10 metric tons, required the movement of an enormous amount of earth and stone. It speaks to a deeply ingrained communal effort, one sustained over many centuries. This wasn't a single isolated event, but a repeated practice as new structures were built and older ones interred. The abandonment of the circular enclosures was a gradual process, likely evolving as the site did. What does this tell us about the people of Göbekli Tepe? It suggests a profound and enduring relationship with their sacred spaces, one that went beyond mere construction and use. It speaks to a cyclical understanding of time and purpose, where creation was intimately linked with return and renewal. Their actions demonstrate a deep reverence for the past, not as something to be discarded, but as something to be honored and preserved, even beneath layers of earth. It also highlights their adaptability. As their beliefs or circumstances evolved, so too did their interaction with this monumental site. The act of burial at Göbekli Tepe is a powerful reminder that the spiritual landscape of our earliest ancestors was incredibly rich and complex. It wasn't simply about building temples to worship. It was about engaging with the earth, with the sacred, in a continuous, evolving dialogue. The burial was not an ending, but a transformation, a testament to a culture that understood the profound interplay between creation, veneration, and the enduring power of the sacred, even when hidden from view.
The carvings themselves offer rare insights into prehistoric religion and iconography. The animal reliefs, foxes, snakes, boars, vultures, and more, are not merely decorative. They are rich in symbolic meaning, hinting at a worldview deeply rooted in the natural environment, where animals, humans, and the spiritual realm were intricately intertwined. While the exact purpose of Göbekli Tepe remains a subject of ongoing debate, many scholars believe it served as a sacred center, a place for rituals and ceremonies, perhaps even a pilgrimage site that drew hunter-gatherer groups from a wide area. The T-shaped pillars, often interpreted as stylized human forms, might represent ancestors, deities, or perhaps even priests overseeing these sacred spaces. The spiritual landscape of these earliest ancestors was clearly far more intricate and nuanced than previously conceived. The intentional burial of Göbekli Tepe is another profound aspect of its legacy. Around 8000 BCE, the circular enclosures were meticulously covered with layers of earth and rubble. This wasn't a random act of abandonment, but a deliberate, organized process. The precise reasons for this burial remain unknown, but it speaks volumes about the people's relationship with the site. Perhaps it was a ritual act, a way of returning the sacred spaces to the earth, or a symbolic conclusion to a specific phase of their spiritual journey. Whatever the motive, this act of preservation inadvertently protected Göbekli Tepe for millennia, safeguarding it from the ravages of time and allowing us today to uncover its secrets. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has compelled archaeologists and historians to revisit long-held assumptions about human development. It challenges the linear model of societal progression, emphasizing the complex and varied pathways of cultural evolution. It suggests that the drive to build monumental structures and engage in shared ritual practices may be a fundamental aspect of human society, present even before the establishment of permanent agricultural communities. The implications are far-reaching, pushing back the timeline for organized human activity and sophisticated thought. Ongoing research at Göbekli Tepe, a joint project involving Istanbul University, Şanlıurfa Museum, and the German Archaeological Institute, continues to unveil more about this enigmatic site. As of 2021, only about 10% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated, with estimates suggesting it could take another 150 years to uncover the entire site. There are potentially 15 or more buried enclosures awaiting discovery, some possibly dating back as far as 15,000 years. Each new excavation, each new artifact unearthed adds another piece to this complex puzzle, deepening our understanding of a time that once seemed utterly unknowable. For example, recent findings of domestic structures, water supply installations, and tools associated with domestic use are leading some current excavators to interpret Göbekli Tepe as a settlement rather than solely a sanctuary, suggesting people may have lived there or stayed there for extended periods. This nuanced understanding only adds to the site's complexity, hinting at an even more intertwined relationship between sacred spaces and daily life. The monumental scale of Göbekli Tepe, constructed without metal tools or domesticated animals, demonstrates an astonishing level of planning, coordination, and artistic mastery. It stands as a testament to the ingenuity and capabilities of prehistoric hunter-gatherers, shattering previous notions of their primitive nature. It reminds us that our earliest ancestors were not merely surviving. They were creating, connecting, and reaching for something beyond the tangible world. The enduring legacy of Göbekli Tepe is a powerful reminder of humanity's innate capacity for cooperation and collective achievement, qualities that have driven our progress throughout history. It offers a unique window into the spiritual and symbolic world of its creators, encouraging us to rethink the origins of civilization itself.
This ancient temple, or perhaps ceremonial hub, not only rewrites the history of civilization, but also underscores the enduring power of shared belief and collective effort in shaping human destiny. As we continue to uncover its secrets, Göbekli Tepe remains a beacon, illuminating the hidden depths of our ancient past and the remarkable journey of human consciousness. We stand at the precipice of an astonishing realization. Göbekli Tepe, this monumental whisper from the past, continues to challenge our most fundamental assumptions about the human story. It shows us that long before the dawn of agriculture, long before permanent settlements dotted the landscape, our ancestors possessed an incredible capacity for organized belief, for monumental architecture, and for shared purposeful endeavor. They were not merely surviving, they were building, imagining, and reaching for something beyond the tangible world. The quiet ancient stones of Göbekli Tepe, still slowly emerging from the earth, speak of a profound human desire to connect with the cosmos, to find meaning, and to express their reverence through collective creation. It is a testament to the power of shared intention, a monumental undertaking born not of necessity, but perhaps of faith and vision. And as more of its secrets are gently coaxed from the soil, we are reminded that history is not a static scroll, but a living narrative, constantly being rewritten by the patient hands of discovery. Göbekli Tepe stands as a timeless beacon, illuminating the incredible depth of human potential and the enduring mysteries that still lie buried, awaiting their moment to redefine our understanding of who we are and where we truly began.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the profound enigma of Göbekli Tepe. If you found yourself captivated by this ancient wonder, please consider subscribing to Whispervale. Your support helps us continue uncovering the forgotten tales of our world. And if you'd like to explore more mysteries from humanity's deep past, we invite you to watch another one of our videos.